Hello guys and welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're continuing off where we left off in the series that I just recently created, aka the Complete Beginner's Guide to DaVinci Resolve 16. Now first of all, if you're new here, I just want to quickly mention that you're probably gonna be a bit confused just because in the first episode we discussed a couple things that we need for this episode. However, the first episode was pretty long and to be honest, you probably don't even need it unless you're taking editing seriously. But anyway, if you are interested to watch the first episode, it's gonna be the first link down in the description below. Just scroll down, click it, and you'll be able to watch that first episode. And now moving on to the video, in the first episode we discussed everything you need to know before editing and the complete basics about it. We didn't necessarily discuss anything that will affect your video or anything that you could use to actually edit. However, this episode is where things change up. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the fundamentals of editing. I'm going to be showing you everything that a beginner could use to edit his videos. Now, this video is an important one. Make sure you watch it and make sure you understand it. Same tip as last time. Make sure to keep DaVinci open in the background and keep up with all the work that we're doing, because that will improve you a lot. And I'm also going to be trying to make this episode as short as possible, because last one, it was very long. Anyway, without further ado, let's just get straight into it. So in the last episode I had a problem with the recording where it wouldn't show any other window besides DaVinci. However, in this episode that problem still exists, but we're not gonna worry about it too much. Now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be taking a clip and I'm just gonna drag it straight into our media pool. After that we're taking the clip and putting it in our timeline. Now in the last video I cut off the audio and a lot of you probably got confused because of that. I only did that just so that it doesn't mess with the microphone that I'm recording on right now, just so it's not that confusing. However, I don't think it's gonna be that big of a deal, so I'm just gonna drop the volume real quick. Speaking of dropping the volume, this is our first topic today: how audio works in DaVinci Resolve. Essentially, audio is represented, as you remember in our last episode, we talked about how video is shown. Video is represented as this rectangle over here that shows our clip, and we can just drag through it and play it. Same goes for the audio. As you can see, it is represented right here as this rectangle that we can drag through and we can hear the audio. However, I'm gonna raise the audio volume a bit so you can notice something. As you can see, the audio is waves, which helps a lot in editing, because this means I can cut out specific places where I do mistakes or parts that I never even wanted in the edit. Now, one thing to watch out for is this button right here. Make sure this audio volume is green. If it's orange, you just have to click this. If this audio is orange, it's going to be playing at a much lower volume than what it's actually going to be rendered at. However, if you make it green, it's going to be playing it as the same volume as it will be rendered. However, all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click on the audio and I'm just going to go ahead and play here and see if it's too loud. And as you can see, that is extremely loud. I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down to 0 and see how loud it is. That is not bad at all. That's actually perfect. The best way you could tell is when you're playing this mixer right here. If you don't have this, it's fine. I forgot how to enable it. I'm pretty sure it's a button that's up here. But this mixer over here displays how loud the audio is. And if it is between the green and the orange part, then that's perfect. As you can see over here, it's up to green and it's barely touching like the yellow part. That's literally perfect. So we're just going to leave the audio as is, and that pretty much covers it for the audio. That's one of the most basic things, one of the most useful things you should probably know. So quick lesson here, I learned this the hard way: don't make your audio too loud. It's such an overlooked thing in editing, yet it's extremely essential. So make sure your audio is at the perfect volume. Now moving on to the second thing that we need to talk about. As you can remember, in the last episode we talked about how you can cut your timeline and use that for different purposes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut up my timeline into separate sections while still keeping the link selection tool on. These sections are going to be showing what we're going to talk about today. So over here in section 1, I want to show you some of the basic effects. If you go over to this button right here and you click on it, this is called the transform tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out a bit just so that you can see what's happening. This tool allows us to change the size of our clip, the rotation, the aspect ratio. This allows you to do whatever you want to the clip from the beginning of it till the end. Now there's a reason why I cut up these clips, because if I applied the transform tool to this entire timeline, see, for example, if I just clicked on here and I apply the transform tool, I will change the clip for the entire timeline, and I didn't want that. I just wanted to change it for one specific part. So keep remembering that the tools affect the clip from the beginning to where it ends. That can be a cut or the end of the clip. It's all up to you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and zoom in like that, and as you can see, if we play our clip, it's just always zoomed in. However, when you go to our next clip, it's all normal. Look at this. There we go. Second thing I want to talk about that's extremely important as well is if we click this arrow right here and we click on dynamic zoom, you'll see these two things pop up. As you can see, there's a green square over here and there's a red square over here. This tool is called the dynamic zoom. Essentially, it will zoom in from one specific area to another depending on where you put these squares. For example, the green square is where the zoom begins, the red is where it ends. If I put the green square over here and I play the clip, it zooms in from the inside to the outside. However, if I just go ahead and replace it, so I'm gonna put the green square on the outside and the red square on the inside, and I'll make it super small to explain another tip, this will zoom in extremely quickly. As you can see. So with these tools, it's as simple as selecting the clip and selecting the tool and then changing it however you need. Quick side note right here, this tip is actually really useful if you want to do subtle movements like this. Now if you remember in the last episode we talked about this area over here as the mysterious box. I'm gonna be talking about that towards the end of the video. If you want to skip over to it, that is no problem. But now I'm gonna be showing you how to change a clip's speeds. So let's say you were making a video and you wanted a part of it to be in slow-mo. You just cut up the area that you want it to be in slow-mo. Now all you have to do is right click it, go over to change clip speed. After clicking on that you will see this window. You want to set the speed to whatever you want. Keep in mind the FPS does matter. If you recorded the clips at 60 FPS, the slow-mo at 50% is going to be played at 30 FPS, which is really smooth slow-mo. That's exactly what we want actually. So we'll set this to 50%. Make sure to untick pitch correction and tick ripple sequence. That is the most important part of this. Just set the speed to 50% and tick ripple sequence. Then click change, and as you can see it's gonna ripple the clip. If you remember what we talked about in episode 1, we talked about rippling. Rippling is essentially, it'll make the clip kind of fit into the timeline and push everything aside, or shrink everything that's next to it just so that the clip fits perfectly. So as you can see, this clip right here is playing in slow-mo. Now if you have problems with the audio being played very weirdly, that's because you forgot to untick pitch correction, so make sure to untick that. Anyway, moving on to our next clip. This one's just quickly for a simple tip that I want to explain, is using the key M. So what that did over there is just place a marker. Essentially, markers are extremely useful if you're doing montages or even if you're making videos. Let's say I just want to select this area for a future part in the video where I just wanted to flash back to it, or I wanted to talk more about it, or I wanted to use it again in the end. I can just press M to mark it, and this marker sits on whatever you selected. Now I have my timeline selected, so I'm just going to go ahead and untick link selections, and after that I'm just going to press M, and as you can see it places a marker on the video. However, I'm going to undo that and I'm going to select the audio, and if I press M, guess what happens? I'm going to place a marker on the audio as well. Right now these might not be useful, but they're actually extremely useful once you get to use them. Now last but certainly not least is our mysterious box right here. This is something that we wanted to discover since our first episode, and now it's time to see what it's all about. Let's go ahead and go for a new clip right here, and we're gonna move over to here and explain everything that you see. Up here is the toolbox. Essentially what the toolbox has is it has all of these stuff in it. All the literal stuff that you will see on your timeline are in here. The first one is video transitions, and if we scroll through them, there's a lot of transitions. There's a lot of shit ones like push and slide, but there's a lot of nice ones like additive dissolve and blur dissolve and cross dissolve. And dip to color, I use that a lot. So you might be wondering, how do you apply these transitions? Let's say I was playing a clip over here and there's a cut in the middle and I want to transition over to here. I'm just gonna cut this part out so there's a point of the transition. So the transition has purpose, so it actually doesn't cut from the same clip. It cuts actually to a next clip. Let's go ahead and use the dip to color dissolve, which I use a lot. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go and hold on to it. We're gonna drag it all the way over to our cut. We're gonna place it. And as you can see, it shows this thing over here, which can be selected and can be changed in the inspector tab. Now you can make the transition longer or you can make it smaller. Essentially, I'm gonna make it dip to a black color by selecting this color over here and changing it to black. And then this transition sits on top of the cut to transition from the first clip to the second one. And so now if we play, as you can see, it transitions into the next clip very perfectly. Now here's an example of the additive dissolve. I personally don't like to use a lot of these since a lot of them are really weird. I only use blur dissolve and dip to color. Those are the two that are most useful. Now you can mess around with a lot of the settings of the transition right over here, and it's really sick. Anyway, for now, if you want to discover what the rest of the video transitions are, you just have to scroll through them and use each of them and see what they do. Moving on to audio transitions, these are extremely useful. We have crossfade plus 3 dB, crossfade minus 3 dB, and crossfade 0 dB. Let's say I had a cut in the middle over here, and I took out this piece of audio over here, and I wanted to somehow link them. I didn't want it to seem like it just cuts the audio off and then cuts this part off. I'll place a crossfade plus 3 dB over here. I'll expand it a bit. I'll place a crossfade minus 3 dB over here, and I'll expand it a bit. So that way it'll ease off from here and it'll ease off into this. You will only understand this if you were using it in your own edit, because that way you can hear the audio and how it's easing into it and easing out of it. Next up is titles. We discussed these in the previous episode. All you need to do is you hold on to the text. It acts as a transparent video on top of your timeline. You just place it, you write down whatever you want, you change the font to something else, and then there you go, you've got text. Don't worry though about text plus, that we're gonna talk about that later. Generators are not extremely useful unless you're looking to do something extremely specific. You can see many tutorials about these on YouTube, but for now they're not gonna be that useful. In the effects tab over here we have adjustment clip and fusion composition. These are really complex. As a matter of fact, we're gonna be talking about these in a future episode, but these are pretty confusing. Next up, we're gonna go over to open effects, and these are just a bunch of effects that you can apply to your video that will change the way your video looks. For example, let's say I wanted to apply a box blur on top of this video. As you can see, it's just gonna blur over the video. After that, we have audio effects. Now these are simple, you just put them on top of your audio and they will affect the audio. For example, if I wanted an echo over my audio, I could just place it on top, and then as you can see, if we play it, there's an echo. Now it's really bad because you need to know a lot about audio to fix this, but I'm not a sound engineer, so who the fuck am I to know? Anyway, that's about it for this video. If you're wondering why I didn't go through all the video transitions or the audio transitions, it's because that will take a lot of time. You have to do that on your own. Just go in a timeline and put all of them and see which ones you like the most and see which ones you hate. But as you can see in this episode, we discussed all the pre-made effects and all the useful stuff that we can use in DaVinci Resolve. And to be fair, from episode 1 and 2, you can already go and start making edits. Anyway, go make sure to mess around with these video transitions and all these effects that are here, because there's a lot to go through. But that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you in the next episode, huh? Bye bye.